Many were not aware that a Marine, an Army soldier, they're not allowed to carry a sidearm if they are not in some kind of a military police capacity. And so, and I completely agree with your comments, by the way, Danny, you were spot on in that this was not some kind of random act of violence that occurred in Chattanooga. There are 5 service members who were murdered. This was an act of terror by a jihadist. This is a radical Islamist that murdered these 4 Marines and 1 sailor because they were wearing the uniform of the U.S. military. Our bases around the country are at Bravo warning level at the moment, which is one of the most highly elevated levels we've had since the anniversary of 9/11. That's because the jihadists have put the U.S. military on notice that they are now targets. And it is ridiculous, it is ludicrous to think that we have a rule from 1992 that prohibits a United States Marine or any member of the armed services to be at a recruiting center and not be able to defend themselves. They were, in fact, of these service members that lost their lives last week, a few of them had served in Iraq and Afghanistan. They had been defending our country on foreign soil. We gave them the tools to defend themselves in Iraq and Afghanistan, and yet when they returned back to the United States, we disarm our soldiers, who we know are targets at the moment. So it is morally wrong, and that is why we've introduced the SEMPER FI Act, which will allow, it will actually give the options to our military to let the folks who are running the operations on the ground determine if indeed they want to allow their service members to carry a sidearm. Rather than have some kind of top-down Washington, D.C. solution, let's remove the barrier, because currently we have disarmed our soldiers in particularly these gun-free zones, which invite the bad guys to come and commit an act of terror, which we saw happen last week. Absolutely,
and it makes our servicemen and women simply sitting ducks. What are your thoughts on, I want to get your thoughts on the Pentagon. When ISIS came out with that hit list, what we heard from the Pentagon, they sent out this memo. Well, don't tie ribbons around the trees. Don't have any sort of, we support the troops or any sort of paraphernalia around your property. And then just recently after this attack in Chattanooga, they were suggesting that, well, don't wear your uniforms at the recruiting stations. Almost as if they're telling them to go to ground. These are our best and brightest who can handle, they've been trained to handle situations like this, but for some reason, Pentagon won't allow them to.
Well, I found those recommendations, frankly, shocking, particularly what we heard in the last 48 hours when they were recommending that our service members not wear their uniform. Now, that is exactly the wrong solution. That is appeasing the enemy right now. What we need to do is give them the tools, allow them to be armed to defend themselves. Because I can tell you what, you have 4 or 5 Marines at a recruiting center, and you have jihadists show up. First of all, they're probably not going to show up because they know the Marines are going to fire back. So it's a deterrent, number one. Number two, if that jihadist gets the first shot off, I have a lot of confidence in the U.S. Marines that they'll be getting the last shots off, and that jihadist will not be leaving that location alive.
Yeah, absolutely. And the pushback from the administration or the silent pushback, rather, from the administration to not expedite this, not have this as something, to not pick up the phone and make some calls. He's got a phone and a pen, and have people support this. To me, it seems like it's advertising. Hey, they're still out there, completely unarmed. Here are where the weak spots are. It's like they're giving a roadmap to domestic terrorism, which is a problem here. It's here.
Yeah. Well, all of us lovers of America who believe in this great country, we know why we have the Second Amendment. We know the truth that the most effective way to stop a bad guy with a gun is with a good guy with a gun. That's just the truth.
Right.
And this is an example of applying that principle now to the U.S. military to allow the men and women who are serving in recruiting centers, given that we now know they are targets. ISIS has put this country on notice, saying that we're going after the men and women who wear the uniform. It is immoral to not allow these men and women to be armed and to defend themselves. Their safety should be our highest priority.